Because there's so much to do and say, we're going to go ahead and start. So, welcome everybody. You're very noisy. I know. All right. My name is Meredith Cosden. I am a longtime what? Wait. Thank you. Okay. My name is Meredith Cosden. I am a longtime congregant, a current board member, and a member of the Mental Wellness Committee. I'm also a retired psychologist, and I used to train psychologists at UCSB. And most important, perhaps, for this is I'm an aging adult. I don't know how that happened, but it did. This is the second of a two-part series on successful aging. And at the very end, if you fill out your feedback forms and there are other topics you'd like us to cover, we will bring that back to our committee. What I want to do now is just quickly introduce our three wonderful panelists today. Gary Linker, PhD, MFT, is a licensed therapist and has been for the past 45 years, co-founder of Pacifica Graduate Institute, former executive director of New Beginnings Counseling Center, and currently the ED for the Center for Successful Aging. He's also involved with several senior living facilities and is the general manager for Alexander Gardens and Via Alamar. Next, Mika Doucette is a hospital and community liaison with the Visiting Nurses Association and has been for the past 4 years. She's also a nationally certified medical interpreter, Spanish and English, and was a staff interpreter at Cottage Hospital for 15 years. She was a dive medic and high school Spanish and health teacher. She has 2 sons who are graduates of CBB's confirmation program. This is the important part. And most important, like all of us, an aging adult and an adult child of aging parents. Finally, Kathy Austin is a nurse, has been a nurse for 22 years, 20 of those doing hospice work. She's employed by the Visiting Nurse Association for the past 12 years and has a master's degree in nursing ed and is a certified hospice and palliative nurse. So I'm very happy to have them all here and look forward to their presentation. Please hold your questions to the end. It'll be an hour covering a lot of topics, and then we'll have half an hour at the end to ask questions and engage in more discussion.
I think it's on. Is this on? Can you hear me okay? All right. Some of you were fortunate to be here at the end of August for Dr. Bordowski's presentation. Very gifted speaker, internal medicine, and very involved with our palliative care and hospice care here in Santa Barbara. He laid out a top 10 list, his top 10 list for aging well, and I laid that over what we brainstormed together, and I wanted to have you sort of check in as we start and think about this checklist, not only for yourself, but any of your loved ones as well. So this is just a little check-in to get us thinking, a little mental Velcro. Part of aging well, as we understand, each of our behaviors here affects another behavior, and it's the culmination of our living well that helps us to age well. So in that, we think about, okay, we need to take care of our health. When was the last time you had your annual checkup? It's annual, it's supposed to be every year, but when was the last time was it really? And thinking about that, don't forget dental. Are you communicating accurately with your physicians? Self-reporting honestly and accurately? Dr. Bordowski talked about our own health needs, and right up there was medications, taking them regularly, taking the right medicines, and taking them as prescribed. So you think about it, what is your med list? Could you name those meds, the dosage and the frequency of them? And you want to think about, is that current? Dr. Bordowski talked about how frequently if you end up in the hospital or at Sansum or one of the other medical facilities, they have a med list for you in your chart, but it may not be current. So you want to be advocating for yourself and having that med list. And asking periodically if any of the medications could be eliminated. You're asking your physician that question, by the way. Because every medicine may have another side effect, so then something else is prescribed for that side effect. So asking if any medications could possibly be eliminated. Exercise. Dr. Bordowski reminded us the importance of not only exercising our bodies, but exercising our mind. Have you heard that expression that motion is lotion? Okay, so motion is lotion for your joints. The more you move, the better you're going to be moving. And think about some of the other benefits of exercise, not only getting your body strong, but that increased strength and increased balance reduces fall risks. And fall risks is huge the older we get. If you're moving regularly, you're also reducing stress and anxiety. If you're able to get outdoors, just stopping and looking around reduces that anxiety, and you start noticing nature. It's got phenomenal benefits. Diet. Okay, thinking about that, we do know what a healthy diet is. Doesn't mean we always follow it. But are you drinking enough water? Are you limiting your salt intake? Is anybody you know, or are you on a special medical diet? And what does that mean? So are you eating healthy? That's a huge question. Effectively monitoring your alcohol intake. Okay, does it take 1 or 2 glasses of wine at the evening to get you to relax? And then Dr. Bordowski mentioned that, yes, it may help you fall asleep, but as the effects of alcohol wear off, it has a slight stimulant effect and it wakes us up. And that brings us to sleep hygiene. 6 to 7 hours a night of sleep is recommended. Are you getting that? Is somebody maybe napping too much during the daytime? There's a lot of good advice for proper sleep, you know, having the room dark and cool. Then thinking about your psychosocial needs. How is your relationship with family and friends? Do you often feel lonely? So that's, I think Gary's going to be talking about that in great extent. Yep. Do you wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose, with an intent, a plan for the day? So are you staying involved with your interests, with people? Is there a risk awareness? Are you evaluating safety, including driving ability? Does the current living situation ensure that you are staying physically safe? Preventing falls.
Don't fall.
Do not fall. So this care planning, this checklist, this mental checklist should be ongoing and occur in a formal manner at least once a year. So with that, that's what we'll be speaking about.
Thank you, Mika. The motto in our home is don't fall. Let's just do whatever you can to not fall. So again, my name is Kathy Austin, and I'm going to be talking about how we can plan for our future needs. And holding the microphone is going to be a little difficult because I like to talk with my hands. So I'm going to read the questions first, and then we'll talk a little bit about each part. Do you have an estate plan, a will, an advanced health directive, a POST, or have you completed a My Wishes document, which I'll talk a little bit about that, but it used to be this, and then Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital and Sansum Clinic have now replaced the 5 wishes. If you have a 5 wishes, it's still valid. But if you want to make out a new one, they have this one called Mycare. I'll hold those up a little bit later. And do you have someone designated as your power of attorney? And in that term, power of attorney, there's a lot involved. So I've got a short period of time, so I'm just going to try to bullet point each of these, and you can ask questions later if you want some clarification. So an estate plan, There are lots of parts in an estate plan, and they're customized and they're unique for every person. Part of an estate plan is a living trust where you appoint someone, if you're unable to, you appoint someone to manage your cash, your properties, and your investments if and when the time comes that you're not able to manage those by yourself. And also, you can communicate how you want who gets what and what happens to your property, your finances after you die. Also part of an estate plan is a durable power of attorney for finances, as well as beneficiary designations. So if you have an IRA account, bank accounts, insurance things where you've designated people as the beneficiaries if you're no longer around. An advanced healthcare directive, and that also is a large thing. An advanced healthcare directive, it's a variety of legal documents where you get to communicate your life preferences and how you die preferences. The advanced healthcare directive consists of a living will, a durable power of attorney for healthcare, which is different than durable power of attorney for finances, as well as a post. And again, this is a post. I'm going to talk a little bit about this next. So primarily what I'm going to focus on is the advanced healthcare directive. So a living will is where you get to communicate to those around you how you want to be cared for in the event that you're unable to make decisions on your own. So it's either a life-threatening illness or you become unconscious and you're not able to make decisions. Another part of a healthcare directive is, advanced healthcare directive is this, which is called Mycare. And it has everything from life-sustaining treatments if you want a ventilator or don't want a ventilator, a feeding tube, dialysis. So it's best to make these decisions now so that those around you don't have to make those tough decisions. Durable power of attorney for healthcare is where you get to appoint someone to make decisions on your behalf medically in the event that you're unable to do so. That person can be called an agent, a healthcare agent, a proxy. You may have heard different things. Something that may seem obvious, but it is really important, is that before you appoint someone to be your agent to make those decisions, you want to talk to them. You want to make sure that you're confident that they're on your side and that they're willing and able to make the decisions that you want them to make. For example, I don't want to be on a ventilator. I don't want a feeding tube, and under what circumstances those things take place. There's also what's called a physician orders for life-sustaining treatment, and in the healthcare world, we call this a POST. It's for those who are seriously ill or who have advanced disease, as well as those who are elderly. Communicates your wishes in the case of an emergency. So for example, one of the first ones is that you get to specify, if your heart stops, do you want them to attempt CPR? Or do you want them to not do CPR? And these are really important things. I've actually sat with family members that say, oh no, we want my mom with terminal cancer to get CPR. And when we explain exactly what that looks like, I won't go into it here because I don't have time. I think it's really important, though, to know what is involved in CPR. Most people say, no, I don't want my mom to have CPR. It also, you get to make a decision about full treatment, whether you want antibiotics as well as feeding tubes, those sorts of decisions. And one of the other good things is we recommend people put this in a prominent place in the home so that, let's say, for example, I'm visiting my neighbor and he or she goes unconscious and I don't know what their wishes are. If they have a post, I can call 911, the ambulance will come, but if there's a post here that says do not attempt resuscitation, they won't. So that's kind of it for me. I could keep talking because I'm passionate about this kind of stuff, but I'm going to end it here, and Gary's next.
Well, I'll just pick up with some of what she was talking about here. So this post is really important. If you know someone who is vulnerable and the paramedics could be called out, the first thing the paramedics will do when they walk into a house or a place is go to the refrigerator and look for a post. So the post is very important to have on the door so they know what to do, because you may not be around if a loved one were to have a sudden emergency. And the notion of being resuscitated or not being resuscitated is a controversial issue. And oftentimes, this is the place where family dynamics begin to take hold, because an individual may or may not want one thing, the family wants something else, and how does that get navigated? And so often in hospitals, you see families fighting over the care of their loved one unnecessarily because the discussions didn't take place ahead of time. So that's on the medical front. The same thing happens on the financial front. For many years now, I've worked at the Center for Successful Aging, worked with a lot of families, a lot of seniors, and have been troubled with the fact that a member dies, they have a will, and this is the first time the family members are hearing what's going to happen to the distribution of assets. And it's a very painful experience to watch these members be mortified by what's being said and then begin the fight that inevitably happens when these things have not been resolved or discussed. So I really urge people I work with to be clear ahead of time. And maybe there'll be some conflict ahead of time. We can navigate and negotiate that. We can't do it when you're gone. So that's a really important issue, and I wanted to emphasize that today to say if you have loved ones, if you have someone who you're caring for, try to have these discussions now, even though they're uncomfortable, because it saves a lot of aggravation, a lot of pain down the road. The thing I want to say next is, so often people don't have a plan in place for what will happen if. And of course, we cannot figure out all the parameters of where our future is going to take us. But some ideas as to what we want to do when we feel we will need care, when we feel we can no longer remain independent in our homes. These are crucially important issues. And of course, the absolute, without a doubt, top priority of everybody I've worked with practically is they want to stay in their homes. There's a certain attachment we have to our home. We are bonded to our homes, understandably. And the last thing we want to do is get in the way of that. But what happens if? What happens when? And so beginning to have those discussions and talk about those kinds of struggles are really important. And the more that's talked about ahead of time, the better off everyone's going to be. Because at a certain point, you can begin to see the proverbial writing on the wall in terms of how things are unfolding. So having something in place that at least gives us a beginning place to start from really, really helps. I want to come back to what Kathy mentioned a few minutes ago about what I call the healthcare advocate. Now, we can have a power of attorney, and the healthcare advocate may or may not be the same person. You may entrust someone legally, financially, to look after things, but want someone else emotionally and medically to oversee what's happening. So we all need a healthcare advocate, someone who understands our philosophy, our ideas about how we want to be cared for, and who will follow those. And if you fill out a Mycare or a My Wishes document, then you have evidence, then you have something on file, actually at Cottage Hospital, that will be there if and when you're taken there. And in a strange way, the fact that Cottage Hospital has a monopoly in our town works in our favor, because the Mycare document will be finalized at the hospital, and any hospital, Cottage, Goleta Valley, or San Ynez, will call it up, and as long as you have signed it and filled it out, it's what they're going to follow. I know that families will challenge it, but at least in theory, I would say, doctors are obliged to follow your instructions and not follow those that are being talked about in the hallways. So having a healthcare advocate who will help enforce and follow through what your Mycare or My Wishes document provides is really, really important. We wonder, so how do I know? When will I know that it's necessary or useful for me to make some changes in my life? And interestingly, especially those of us who are Jewish, have an association to this area, because in my field, they're called ADLs, which is not the Anti-Defamation League. I'll just remind you about that. There are 5 ADLs, And the 5 ADLs begin to tell us that something's changing and something needs to be attended to. So I look around the room, and no one who I can see in this room is facing any of these issues with ADLs. But in my life and in my day, I face them all the time in terms of working with individuals and with families.
Are you asking what an ADL
So let's ask who an ADL is. So who know, pardon? Right. Activities of daily living. And what are those? Well, they're real simple. They're getting out of bed. They're showering. They're eating. They're transporting. And they are the ability to move in and out. Did I miss one?
No, I think you did a good job.
Did I call off all 5? And I'm getting a sign to shut up. And so I'm going to move over now to Mika.
So this comes full circle back to reporting back to our physicians accurately. And many times we don't notice that there are deficits, that we aren't managing well. And it's other family members that are seeing that you're regularly forgetting, not taking medications properly, not bathing, leaving flames on as you prepare your meals, that sort of thing. So it's important to have that advocate, your healthcare agent, also attend physician appointments. And in the folder that I've left for you on the desk that I've included, there's 2, but if you need more, let me know. This is the form from Sansom, because Sansom is also quite large in our community, that allows a physician to speak to you if you are not the patient. So it needs to get signed, and this is done every year. So I've given you 2 of those in there. This conversation that Gary's talking about, all of this allows us to have the conversations with our loved ones before it's actually needed. But if you don't have that conversation, maybe you have all the documents taken care of, maybe you've worked with the finest attorney and it's all done, but if nobody knows about it, it's almost the same as it not being done. So you have to have those conversations. Gary also mentioned about ADLs, the activities of daily living, and I also have a handout in the folder on the aging brain and dementia, and it talks a little bit about when you start to falter, once that brain starts to falter, what's happening, and at what point you really need to start getting additional help.
You know, Micah, the mention of the ADLs reminds me of a personal story that I'll just share briefly. My family and us all were going to Palm Springs as my parents were getting elderly. And I know, can't hear me, sorry. I said my parents, a little story to talk about the ADL issue. Our family was close-knit, and we all went to Palm Springs for a vacation. And I noticed, as we were eating together, that my mother was ravenous. And she was asking everyone, are you finished with that yet? And they weren't eating. They were not eating. And they were hungry. And that was the signal, whoa, something has to change here. So when we talk about ADLs, we talk about the ability to make food, or the comfort level in making food, or the desire to make food. Just because you can't feed yourself, that's one thing. But if you're not cooking or shopping or feeding yourself, that's another. And that was our signal to our family that something had to change radically when we realized that.
In terms of resources, when families do need help, there's a myriad of amazing agencies in this town, and we thought rather than speak to and possibly forget an amazing agency, you have a way to reach out to us. There's a card in there, and of course just calling VNA. We can speak specifically to whatever your needs or questions may be and help direct you to that particular resource.
Should we go to this right now?
So, not quite. I
Okay.
got a minute.
Okay.
All right. So we were talking also about, Kathy said, do you have a plan in place for having your needs met as you advance in years? Okay. And it's not enough to simply say, I want to stay home. Okay. We need to be able to stay home safely. And what does that mean? Do you need help? Are you willing? What did Dr. Bordowski say? Terminal stubbornness. Okay. So true. Not willing to accept help, not wanting to use a walker because that's what old people use, not wanting to use a cane, just not recognizing that you may, in fact, need help. And then thinking about what that help might look like and cost. It's not cheap to have help in your home. So who's going to oversee your care? What does that look like? Sometimes family's not the person to do it. We all know that we respond better from maybe a stranger, maybe an outside person, but we save our very best behavior for the people that we love the most. Very true. So who's going to oversee your care? It may not be best served by family. Maybe it is. This is all part of the conversation that needs to be had. If you do need to leave your home, where? When? When is it time? Are you going to go so willingly? Think about somebody who's been living on a gorgeous Santa Barbara property, all outdoors, all orchard and gardens, and then to go into an assisted living where you can basically take one or two pieces of furniture. That's a big transition. How's that going to go? Or if it's a memory care facility, which is a locked facility, to take somebody who wants to be home in the wide open and continue to live their life and into a locked facility, when is the right time to do that? So thinking about all of those, there is no one right answer. You know, it looks different for every family, which is why we find ourselves reinventing the wheel with each and every family situation that comes up. But there is help out there.
Several things came to mind as you were talking. One, we didn't talk about hearing aids, because that's another really crucial kind of subject and a really tender subject. I have a 93-year-old father-in-law who loves coming to our house and putting our TV at about 60. I watch it at about 22. And he says, "Is it too loud?" Yeah, it's a little bit too loud. No hearing aid, no need for a hearing aid. Their hearing is just fine. So the things you bump up against and what you decide to go to war about and deal with are one thing, and what are important issues are another. And the unfortunate part is that there have been direct correlations made between people who struggle to hear and the advent of dementia. Just as a recent study just came out this past week, that walking 10,000 steps a day lessens the potential of dementia by 50%. So there's lots of things we can do that will help us fend off the whole notion of loss of memory and of capacity. So that's really important to kind of realize and recognize. And that's why our list at the beginning there was so important, because we can take preventative steps. Yes, genetics are one thing. Yes, biology is another thing, but there's a lot that we can do, and more we're learning the steps we can take to deal with all that. But what happens when that time comes? That is very clear that mom or dad really can't stay in this home any longer. How do you deal with that? How do you approach that? And of course, every situation is somewhat different and unique. And what are the senior options? So let me just say for a moment, in case people are not clear, there are 4 levels of care outside the home. There are facilities that offer independent living, and by independent, it means you're on your own, but we provide all the meals, typically. You can have a kitchen if you want, but there's an option that meals are made for you, so you have that. There's activities in those facilities, and there are staff available to assist you should you need additional help. They don't provide the help, but they'll find you the help. That's the first level. Second level is assisted. So if somebody has 1, 2, 3 ADLs they need assistance with, that's what assisted living is. And interestingly now, in terms of recent laws that have been passed and regulations that have been made, if an individual is not prone to wandering, or an individual is not prone to be disruptive, they can remain in an assisted living facility for the rest of their lives. So even if a person has, quote, full-blown dementia and doesn't really know where they are and doesn't really speak very much, they can stay in a more engaging, active, assisted living facility. So that's the second level. The third level is referred to as memory care. And for individuals who are prone to wandering or who have the tendency to be disruptive because of cognitive dysfunctions that are occurring, they need to be in a memory care facility. And as Mika mentioned, those are locked. And they're locked to prevent wandering. But we still hear in the news people who escape, because they find a way to get out and the door might be open and boom, they're gone. So that's the threat, and that's the reason why facilities are locked. There's some in town who have lovely patios and gardens, all enclosed. So it's not like a prison or anything, but it's very much more contained. And then the last one is skilled nursing. In skilled nursing, you probably have known someone who's gone to skilled nursing. If someone has a fall or someone has a medical incident and they need intensive care or they need medical instruments like oxygen, they must be in a skilled nursing facility. Oxygen is not allowed in assisted or memory care. So someone has to go to a skilled nursing facility. That might be temporary or it might be permanent, depending on their situation and the things they're dealing with. So those are the 4 levels that we have available in our town. And we have a plethora of situations and places people can go. Unfortunately, as Mika mentioned, they're costly. They're expensive. And there are a lot of people who need that kind of help who can't afford it. And so if someone is determined to be in those needs and they're not able to take care of themselves, the state will provide a facility for them. And sadly, I need to share with you that I would hope that none of you would allow any of your loved ones to go into any of those facilities. Sadly, I've been in them, and I wouldn't want anyone I know to have to live in one of those facilities. It's really unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And the funding is not there to properly provide for these folks, and so it's a very marginal kind of living situation. So I have a very strong bias when people come to me and say, well, can't the state take care of my mother, my father? Yes, they can, but I would recommend that you visit them because you may not want them to go in there. You may want to go to family and friends and people that you know and see if there's some way to make it financially viable for them to not go to that facility. That's a bias of mine, and I have plenty of evidence to offer you on that.
A
What
lot
else?
of this has to do with what's available to us through our insurance. And unfortunately, not all of us are very well versed in insurance speak. But if these are specific questions, there are more resources. Some of our social workers would be happy to help and say, you know what, this insurance would cover here. Or if you or your loved one are in the hospital, the care management team, the case management team, they can help with that. These are the facilities that might be available to you. If you find yourself with spare time, look at the Family Service Agency of Santa Barbara's website, and there's a link to our ombudsman. And on that link from the ombudsman, there are very comprehensive lists of skilled nursing facilities, of caregiving agencies, and how they fared in various evaluations. So it's really interesting to see, because there's more than you think out there.
What Mika is talking about in terms of insurance is Medicare and long-term care insurance. And so, understandably, with Medicare, someone can have 100 days, a year, a calendar year, in a senior skilled nursing facility. But Medicare does not cover assisted or memory care unless you have long-term care insurance. That's a whole different situation.
It is. And most, it's very, very difficult and very costly nowadays to get long-term care insurance. It's something that most folks have had since, wow, the 80s, 90s, but it's really hard to find new policies or companies that are willing to underwrite that. So the last part of this.
Caregiving.
It's caregiving.
We've got to go to caregiving.
Okay, and that seems to be one of the biggest questions and needs that come up. Caregiving is not considered clinical, so it's not covered by insurance.
So I get calls probably 2 or 3 a week. I have a loved one, I need help in the house, where can I find some help? And there is a whole gamut of opportunities depending on one's financial situation, as you can imagine. So we now have a plethora of what are called in-home care agencies. They will provide staff that will come in and look after a loved one, provide various services, shop, cook, clean, care, shower, all the rest of it. Sorry to say, quite pricey. And the prices have just gone sky high these last few years. And on top of that, there's usually a 4-hour minimum. So they want to come out and provide services to you. It may range from $35 to $40 an hour, 4-hour minimum. So that's what happens in the marketplace. Then we have a program, which I'm very proud of, at my agency, referred to as Real Help. And we have a coordinator of that program, a volunteer, and she has vetted about 8 or 10 people who are semi-retired, who can offer similar kind of services. They're reliable. We know they're trustworthy. They're good, caring people, and they charge $20 an hour. And depending on availability and so forth, that's an option for people. Now, here's a case where if you don't have any resources and you are what we call Medicare, Medi-Cal, you're eligible for a program called IHSS, which is referred to as In-Home Support Services. Now, In-Home Support Services is run by our government, and you might think that's a nice thing to do. What a wonderful service. Well, the state has an ulterior motive. They want to keep people in their homes because they don't want them in state-run facilities they're paying for. So what they've done is they hire people, and they sadly do not pay them enough money. They're now up to $14 an hour, and individuals will come into your home if you qualify and provide services that you need, free to the individual who is Medi-Cal, Medicare. And they assess how many hours of help you need each month, and then they provide that service for people. So those are the gradations of help that are available for caregiving. So you want to talk some, Mika, about how you choose somebody?
Well, I want to just touch on the IHSS. A lot of that is for family members who are already providing that care. It allows them to get a small salary for the care that they're already providing. If not, the county maintains a list of IHSS qualified workers, which becomes available to the person or family member who qualifies. And then it's up to you to go through that list and vet the people on it. And the skill level, the training varies tremendously. So there's that. The agency versus an independent caregiver, there's a couple of other things that are important to note. $35 an hour for an agency caregiver, that was a few years ago. Right now, they're all kind of hovering around $40 an hour through an agency. And there is still great value in going through the agency because you are then hiring the agency versus an employee. Okay, the agency's assuming all of that employer liability. These are licensed individuals. They are assuming the workers paying in workers' comp, all of that, and it's not you becoming an employer and assuming that risk and liability yourself. An agency, if somebody calls in sick, they're going to send somebody else out to you. Whereas if you're hiring somebody independently and they are sick, now what do you do? So there's pros and cons. Yes, you're paying less per hour, but there's other costs as well. That's not to say that there's not amazing, wonderful people in both. Oftentimes, some are working independently and as well as working with an agency. So we do have quite a few lists of agencies we work with at Visiting Nurses as well as individuals. So you want to think about that for choosing help also. Think about your loved one or your personality. It takes a while to find the right match. Hopefully you're not having to look for this person while you're in crisis mode and getting somebody in immediately. But just like it takes a while and you're not friends with just anybody, this person needs to take some time to learn the person's habits, and the person who's receiving the care needs to get accustomed and used to having another person around. What is it that they're going to do? You know, nobody wants somebody hovering right over them. So thinking about what it is that you're going to have them do. Okay?
And picking up on that, these are people who have various needs of their own, and so we advise whenever you hire somebody, even if you think they are trustworthy, you want to protect the assets of your loved one. So taking jewelry and valuable items out of the home when an individual is there is a safe step to take. Sometimes, and medications can also be abused. So you need to be careful about who you're bringing into your home or someone else's home, and be thinking about the potential downsides of what could happen, even in the best of circumstances. Cash, access to finances, credit cards, we've seen just a lot of all of that kind of thing over the years.
Also in the folder, I've put a brochure in there for the Coast Caregiver Resource Center. This is an amazing agency run by Cottage Hospital, but it centralizes all sorts of information on caregivers. And one of the most amazing programs that they offer is grant-based respite care. Because sooner or later, everybody just reaches a point where they just can't. It's a lot of work. You don't want to get to the point where you're pulling your hair out. And because that's right where the elder abuse potential really is at its peak. So before you get to that point, or it may be because you're having to head out of town because your daughter's getting married or something like that, and you need to have respite care. So the respite care program is in there. It's, they, like a IHSS, they will come and evaluate and see how many hours of care the person qualifies for and help set you up with that respite care. It's an amazing program.
Maybe this is a good time to go to Burnout.
To what?
Burnout.
Yes. We also had a question. Do you?
Wanted to say these are in Spanish.
Okay.
But we know about the agency, and you told us what they do, so we can reach out if you.
Okay.
Well, Mika speaks Spanish, she knows what it says.
Mariela can help you. So sorry about that. Yeah.
Well, thanks for mentioning that, because there are lots of support groups in town with a variety of issues. Our center has a general support group for someone taking care of somebody, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. There are many agencies here in town that provide ongoing support groups for people who are dealing with loved ones in a variety of situations.
You know, given the size of the group, perhaps we can open for questions now?
I think-
Or do you have more?
I think we're good. Or did I speak too soon?
Well, we want to talk about how to deal with stubbornness and rigidity and that kind of idea, and the real hot topics of when do you take the car away, you know, and when do you insist that they get additional help, and how to strategize about that. But we can incorporate that in the Q&A. Closer? Sorry. Okay. So let's go ahead. We'll open it for questions. Sure. Yeah.
So any questions about these topics or others of interest? Yes.
All the things you were saying, the estate planning, the living trust, the power of attorney, how do we get the list of, is it a lawyer that you go to?
Super good
Is there, do you have a list somewhere people do that in town?
Excellent question. Yes, there is a list. And again, we didn't include a comprehensive list of everything. Gary has a good start to that. But you can also give us a call, and yeah, my card's in there as well, and we can direct you to that. But that would be an estate attorney for that type of a thing. Yeah.
And one more thing, CDB offers, because I just did mine, the medical directives workshop. So you do a workshop for an hour and a half, more or less, and then you fill out your form and you meet with a notary. I did it, I just completed and it's in coordination with Cottage Hospital, so you can then give, they give a copy there to Cottage, and then you can have one for you, for your loved ones, and for another.
It's a two-part workshop that's done, and there's a couple coming up at the end of September and the beginning of October. Not here at CBB, although I'm sure we could probably get another one arranged, maybe? Yeah. The next one coming up will be at the Hospice of Santa Barbara and also at Family Service Agency.
I do want to say too that these sorts of, oh, thank you. These sorts of documents, you do not need an attorney. I would recommend an attorney for doing things like your living will, especially related to finances. You can fill out this document and you can get it notarized. Some of the advanced directives, you could actually, advanced directives for healthcare, you could actually go online and download a document, print it out, and have, I think it's two witnesses sign it. So if Mika came to me and said, this is my advanced directive, I could sign it saying that.
As long as she's not my power of attorney
Yeah.
or a possible beneficiary, she could sign.
I see people use their neighbors frequently to sign.
I was also gonna say that it is online, available, fillable.
Yes.
And you mentioned getting it to Cottage, but you also wanna get it to Sansom. Because even though they're both use my charts,
Yeah.
they're separate.
They are separate. When it goes to, when you're doing the workshop through the Hospice of Santa Barbara, and when Jeannie West came and did it here with you, the volunteers will make a copy and they will get that scanned into the Cottage system, okay? It is two separate systems, but usually if it's in Cottage, that's where it's gonna be needed.
Okay, and it's open for questions. Loud, though.
Microphone, so
So we hear the question.
When you're talking about the advanced healthcare directive and the post, let's say it's somewhat contradictory or it's done at different times, which prevails? You know, ideally, you'd like it to be exactly the same in terms of your wishes, but let's say for various reasons, that's not the case. How does it?
For example, if somebody has said that they do not wish to be resuscitated, but at the same time, they want full treatment. Okay, that is not, it's not exactly in sync. So that's where some clarification comes in. The post is a physician's order, so that is something that after your decisions are discussed and indicated on the hot pink paper, the doctor reviews it and makes sure that they're in sync. You're not going to choose do not resuscitate as well as the full treatment.
And I could comment on that too. Oftentimes, a person will fill out the advanced healthcare directive when they're well. So that's why it's a really good idea that you're appointing a person to make decisions for you. So if I'm caring for a loved one and now they have a terminal illness and I know that they've completed the post form that says, I don't want to go back to the hospital, I don't want to be resuscitated. So even if that may not exactly gel with what the healthcare directive says, as the agent, I know your wishes. So even though, 20 years ago, but now that you have a terminal illness and you just recently completed the post, I know what your wishes are so that's why it's important to get someone that you can trust to help make those decisions for you.
And the most recently dated is the one that takes effect. We started this conversation talking about how this is an ongoing process and should be formally revisited every year. You think about, I have children in their 20s who have completed these because I made them do it, and their choices now logically are not going to be the same as when 30, 40 years from now, or after they have kids, they're going to be making different choices than they did as young adults.
Could you talk about the importance of, I know this is a program about we as we age and thinking about our aging parents, but when you brought up that issue of having your children do this, could you address why or how important you think that is to have young people complete some of these as well?
Yeah. I have a dear friend who many years ago, out in Florida, there was the Terri Schiavo case. Some may or may not happen to live in Florida during the time. And I had a dear friend say to me, why is this such a problem? Why are they in court? And
Talk about what it is for those who don't know, Terri Schiavo.
oh, well, yeah, Terri Schiavo, if I recall correctly, had a stroke. And she was divorced from her husband, or they were separated. And her husband was saying, I know Terry's wishes, and Terry would not want to be on life support. She ended up being in a permanent vegetative state. And her mom was saying, no, we want to keep her alive. And so now they're in court. And so my friend said to me, why is this happening? And I said, because Terri Schiavo, even though she was young, did not specify what her wishes were at end of life. So had she filled out a form that said, I don't want to be, sorry, so sometimes I just say it like it is, hooked up to a something to sustain my life, pull the plug at a certain point. So her husband was saying, I know she wouldn't want to be hooked up to a machine, and the family was saying, we don't have that in writing. So even Terri Schiavo, I think she was in her 30s or something, and I'm sorry, Mika, but as long as I've been a nurse, I think of the young men who end up in permanent vegetative states because, they're daredevils, or they rode their motorcycle real fast, or they drive cars. So as a nursing student many years ago, I did a stint in the ED and saw a motorcycle person come in, and that's when I personally sat down and did my own. And you can be specific. You can say it's okay to have me hooked up to life support for this amount of time if the care team thinks, if medical people think that it's going to do me some good, and at some point I'm going to come out of it. But if it gets to the point where it looks like this is the way it's going to be till the end, you can say, I don't want that. So I think it's very important.
Agreed. It's our young people that are having the riskier behaviors, the knucklehead type of behaviors. Also, what Kathy said about being connected to life support, that can allow, even if you don't want to live like that, it allows family to congregate to come and say goodbye. So you can have that written down in there on your advance directive. Please keep me connected to life support until my family can gather.
You can actually write it in.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. You're in control. It puts you in control even when you can't talk.
I just realized sitting here that there's a very important subject we haven't touched on. And it's the major one that people bring to me when I meet with them, the issue of loneliness. Tragically, and COVID,
You can put it there.
loneliness, and tragically, COVID, of course, has sent that, 10 times higher. So I just want to say that, unfortunately, a lot of our community resources are not, even now, still not available. The senior center of Santa Barbara is still closed. The Goleta Community Center, closed. So there are facilities that used to offer recreational social services that no longer, at this point, are doing that. They're in, quote, transition. And my resource directory says that. But I do want to mention a couple of things, and that is that churches are active involved. And there is a church on the Mesa, specifically, the Free Methodist Church, that has a social gathering with lunch and activity twice a month. The Jewish Family Service has a schmooze room every Tuesday at 11:30 for people to come, have lunch, and involved in the activities and meet other people. So I recommend these kinds of activities for people to help them get out of that loneliness kind of place that so many people, unfortunately, are are trapped in. So I wanted to mention that today. We don't have enough of those kind of programs, but we do have a few that are somewhat meaningful for people, along with the things that churches do. She had a hand.
Yeah, thanks. Another problem, Gary, is that the the A-level retirement communities in town, they've got 11 and 12-year waiting lists to get into the continuous care train, you know, to start independent living, graduate to assisted, graduate to full care. And what, you know, we need more retirement communities. Or maybe we have enough separate assisted living facilities for that level.
Yeah. Good point. So I do want to spend a couple of minutes. We'll take that question. Go ahead.
Where at Cottage Hospital do we get that blue booklet, Mycare?
The Mycare document is available through Hospice of Santa Barbara.
Oh, it's hospice.
They are now offering that program. It used to be offered.
Oh, is it hospice?
You have the form too?
That's fine.
It's grant-based with a variety of agencies. You can download it from the cottage website.
I think we have it in our
Yeah, so Hospice of Santa Barbara and VNA Health and all those places. Yeah.
Yeah, the logo's on the back.
Is that the one you were saying everybody should have in living children's care? That's the thing?
You know what, if you're gonna do one, do them both, go for it.
What's the other one?
The other one is called the Pulse form, the hot pink one. This one requires a doctor's signature in order to be a binding medical order. This is just letting your wishes be known. Think of this one as a summarized version of your advance directive. Your three most imminent life-threatening situations. If your heart were to stop beating, would you want to be resuscitated or allow nature to take its course? Treatment, full treatment, that means being intubated and everything else that entails.
Grab the phone because because we're recording and people are not gonna hear you.
Okay.
Gary, let go of the Thank you.
Summarizing what I said, the PULST, if you think of this as a summarized version of your advance directive being the document that's letting your wishes be known, what treatments you would want specifically and not want. Okay, this is a doctor's order. It requires discussion with your physician, and then it's signed by the doctor and scanned into hospital records. Yes?
Hold on, please pull in the microphone.
Okay, the California, as I think we probably all know, has a law of ending or helping you end your life when you want
The End
to.
of Life Option Act.
Right. And other states have similar laws. I belong to Compassionate Choice, and they promote these things. Do you have any knowledge of, can you go to Switzerland and have that done, or Canada? I think they have more
It's
liberal
legal
laws.
here in California.
But I mean, some of these places have more liberal laws. They allow you to go, hey, I'm done. Let me out of here.
Switzerland. I'm telling you, Switzerland. I know because in Israel you can't, and people go to Switzerland. Switzerland has facilities for that.
Yeah, I don't know how other places work. I know how Santa Barbara works.
Do you want to tell us?
Sure.
Share with us.
Yeah, so EOLOA, we call it, that stands for the End of Life Option Act. Mika maybe speak. Anyways, so the End of Life Option Act, you have to have a terminal illness, and there are, I believe there's 2 steps. So you can't just say that you want it. A physician will come to your home. I'm familiar with those that are on our VNA Health hospice services that utilize the End of Life Option Act. A physician will go to the home. They interview the person to make sure that they're mentally with it. And then I think they wait a little while, and then they interview them again in 2 weeks to make sure that those are still your wishes. So you weren't just having a one-time, I think I'd really like to do this. One of the criteria is that you have to be able to ingest the medication by yourself. So if I have a family member that wants to utilize the End of Life Option Act, but they get to the point where they can't drink it themselves, or we actually had somebody with a feeding tube that was able to administer the medications through the feeding tube. So how it works is once the physician agrees that you're eligible and that you're mentally able to make that decision, they will prescribe a medication, and I forget what's in it, but it's a whole bunch of medications that end a person's life. You'll have that medication in the home. Of course, we're very careful on who gets that and make sure that it's locked up so that someone else can't get to it. And what's interesting is that there are a couple of things happen. We have actually had people that got the medication in their home because they wanted it just in case. And you get, if I have it in my home because I think I'm going to use it, I can do it whenever I want. Some people make an appointment, or they say, I'm going to, do it on, next Thursday at 5 o'clock. They have certain people around. So they ingest the medication, and it usually takes anywhere from an hour to 5 hours for it to work. Does that answer your question? Any other questions about that?
No.
No.
I have another one, and I do want to hear the end of, the other topics you wanted to hit on. With the post, it seems to me that, let's say, I have a seizure. I'm perfectly healthy. I don't have any terminal condition. I would want that to have some reflection of, my Mycare wishes are very clear. Mm-hmm. If I'm ill, we're not doing the other stuff. And there's no chance that I'm going to survive. But that might be different for a fall in the house that incapacitated me.
I would recommend for people that know they do not want to be resuscitated, use a pulsed, because if it's not there, they're going to resuscitate. And I agree with you. I'm relatively healthy. If I have a heart attack or something happens, I have an advanced directive, so they will come to my home or wherever I am and perform CPR. Because the goal would be, I'm going to go to the hospital and I think I'm healthy and young enough that I may bounce back to some level. But I have an advanced healthcare directive that if I don't bounce back, I'm not going to be attached to a machine. So the first time, it was many years ago, but the first time personally I became aware of the pulsed, I was living with my 96-year-old grandmother who said, under no circumstances do I want to return to the hospital. Absolutely not. I got one of these. She signed it. I took it to her physician. The physician signed it. It went on the refrigerator. We had caregivers in the home so that if something happened to grandma, she wanted to die at home. And it says DNR, which stands for allow natural death. So in the hospice culture, in the hospice world, I'm trying to get DNR replaced with AND for allow natural death, because that's what happens if we don't do CPR.
By the way, today there are also, I believe, bracelets that you can wear that said DNR. So that's another option if you're not all the time with a person that already decided or they're in like late stages or whatnot. There's a bracelet.
If there's other topics, Gary, did you want to cover something else before?
Here, there's another question.
You have another question?
I will. Go ahead.
In terms of pain meds, I don't see where the. Okay. In terms of pain meds, does the Pulse or the Advanced Healthcare Directive address that directly?
No.
Okay. So you need to fill in what your specific wishes are in terms of.
Well, theoretically, you've already worked with your doctor and have gotten whatever palliative care you need. When the paramedics come in, they don't know you have chronic pain, and they don't know what to give you, so they're not going to prescribe. They're just going to stabilize you and take you to the hospital.
Are you saying you want medications or you don't want medications?
Well, I'm just saying,
You're saying what's the role?
in advance, what are you putting down on the forms? Because I don't see it all being addressed. Are you saying it's just covered indirectly by the Pulse and the Advanced Healthcare Directive, or specify in particular? In other words, if you want to die naturally, but you don't want to experience pain, is that assumed that the doctors are going to do the right thing? That kind of question.
Yeah, that's where hospice comes in, and we are the professionals when it comes to managing pain. We do it a lot better than they even do in the hospital. Unfortunately, you have to be on hospice to get that level of of comfort. But I forget who I was talking to. Maybe it was you. I forget. Just today, where, sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit. Yeah, just talking about pain management. I know what it was. There is a kind of a myth out there that the minute somebody gets onto hospice, we start giving them morphine and then they die. So number one, that's, as a clinician, that's not in my favor to just kick people off. And sometimes what I like to tell people is they think, oh, I work quite a bit at our inpatient facility, Serenity House, and I was talking to someone today who is in the community, and in her circle of people, she's heard the reputation is that if your loved one goes to Serenity House, they give them morphine and they're going to be gone in 2 days. So I said, well, they probably would have passed away in 2 days anyways, because it's not in our favor. It doesn't do me any good as a nurse to just give somebody so much medication that they'll pass away. Plus, the amount of medication that you actually have to give someone in order for them to pass away is upwards of I think it's, to give you an example, I think the End of Life Option Act, there's 5 different medications. One of them is morphine, and it's 5 grams. 5 grams of morphine. As a nurse, on average, I administer 5 to 10 milligrams every couple of hours. And, you know, for people, I understand I do this all the time, but for people that aren't familiar with morphine, you know, just the M word can be quite scary. So we are good advocates that we give medication if they're comfortable. If they're not comfortable, we give a little bit more, We just don't, you know, it'd be like having a garden and you just dump all this water on it. Like, it's not, you know, you want to take care of it and do it right.
On this subject of chronic pain, Kathy, if someone does not have Medicare and they're experiencing chronic pain and their doctor seems to not be effective in dealing with it, are there chronic pain specialists they can go to?
Yes, there are chronic pain specialists that you can go to. If you're not comfortable, I recommend getting a second opinion. There's also a wonderful program in Santa Barbara called palliative care. Palliative care, the palliative care team is super good at, the difference between palliative care and hospice is palliative care is for people with life-threatening illnesses. So they may have a new diagnosis of heart disease, they may have a new diagnosis of diabetes. That doesn't mean that they're gonna die, it means that they have a life-threatening illness. Whereas on hospice, you have a terminal illness. So you can have heart disease and not be terminal. So the palliative team is really good at managing chronic pain because they're getting a lot of these chronic illnesses.
I just wanted to share real quickly that we have a resource directory that our center produced, and I brought copies of it here. There is a directory offered from the Area Agency of Aging that is a county-wide document. I find it a little cumbersome. It's like 110 pages. This is 6 pages, but it's divided into 4 sections. And the first section is assessment, if you need some kind of assessment. The second section is information and referral. The third section is direct services and case management. And the fourth is counseling. And they're all right here. So you're welcome to pick one up when you leave. I didn't know how large our crowd would be. We didn't put them in the folders, but you're welcome to have one. And as much as possible, I've tried to bring it up to date. Every agency has a code, which is listed in the chart, and they have their services and their phone number. Not their address, because they move around a lot. And there's no personnel listed because people change their jobs. But it is somewhat current, so I wanted to mention that. Any last questions anybody has?
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Meredith, for
Keeping us on track.
the umpire.
I have the our general brochure for VNA Health in the folder. I have specific brochures on home health and the hospice program backed by the cookies.
Don't forget to fill out the survey so we know how much about Thursday.
question with pain meds. Let's say, and in many situations, you're paralyzed, you can't speak. Can you request that in those situations you're automatically given pain meds? Because people who can't speak, sometimes they're in great pain. How do you know?
I have seen people write in hand, I do not want to be in pain.
So you can put that on the Advanced Healthcare Directive?
Handwrite really specific.
But how do they know if you can't indicate that?
Well,
Let's
that's
say-
why you want to prepare that document today.
Right.
And you want to write.
So you could say that if I can't communicate, I want to be on pain meds because I'm not severely ill? Okay, all right, that's good. That's real helpful. A couple other things. Where do you get those bracelets?
That I don't know.
I know they have a little card you can put. I know you can put a card in your wallet. That there is one.
Primary care physician or
Yeah, I do, yeah.
check with, that's an easy question, I wish I knew.
Yeah.
That person
I will, because I have a physical in October, so I'm gonna go over the pulse,
And a trust
some of
fund.
these other things.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's some of those even they say, you know,
I forgot there was a movie about someone, I forgot the
that's
type
all
of thing. He was paralyzed, he couldn't